The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
There's a growing movement of teachers who say they are tired of being blamed for societal problems that are out of their control. They are also pushing back against what they call corporate education reform and those who have contempt for real teaching and learning. They call themselves badass teachers, or BAT for short. We're going to find out more about them on today's edition of The Professors. Joining us to talk about a group that refers to itself as badass teachers are Shawnice Reynolds, a parent and education activist, Tim Megan, a national board certified teacher at Roosevelt High School in Albany Park, and Katie Gilson, a national board certified teacher at Charles Sumner Math and Science Academy in North Lawndale. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so badass teachers, I have to admit it, I love the name. And I don't want us to dwell too much on the name because I know you guys have gotten some kickback about the name within itself. But let's talk about what is the purpose of Badass Teachers?
Badass Teachers, I think, is a national organization that I believe there are 38,000 members strong organization. And we hold certain core values in common. We believe in public education. We believe in certified, highly qualified teachers, and we stand against the excessive use of standardized testing, and we stand against corporate education reform.
Okay, excellent. Now, you guys have been around, was it just a year, right?
Not even a year.
Not even a year, and you're already at, because I read the article in Education Week in last June 2013. At that time, there were 8,000 members, and now there are over 38,000 members.
Yes, it was founded by Mark Nyson in New York and Priscilla, hope I get her name right, Sandsteed in Oklahoma.
And then a Maria Macy Kifoyle.
Yes.
Also, right? So it's a coalition of teacher advocates for student rights and their learning environment. So tell me, how does Badass work? How does this work?
Well, we're an online social organization, but that doesn't limit us. We have actions within our individual cities and states, within our school districts. We are pro-union. We're not against the unions. We actually work with our unions to get more parental involvement and to actually get more teachers to actually stand up, since they're being blamed for everything that's happening with public education or education as a whole. Teachers are tired and they're fed up of being blamed for everything, so they decided to use their voice. And what bigger way to use it with social media? So the number has spiraled. It started off at less than 1,000 a week, and it just grew that 1,000 every so many days are joining, and it's just snowballed. We never knew it was going to get that big. When I joined, it was 5,000 members. It was 5,000 members, and we stand together. We do letter writings. We do blasts on Twitter where we reach out to those people who are reforming, not to use bunny rabbits, public education or education as a whole. We do, like I said, the Twitter storms. We do letter writings. We do sit-ins.
And it's all focused on whatever that particular issue or topic is, centering around corporate education reform, excessive testing,
Common Core standards,
things of that nature. Okay, so let's talk about, so what activities have you guys done here in Chicago?
Well, with the Badass Teachers in Chicago, just for recently, we had 2 schools to do 100% of their teachers to boycott the ISET test. And from that, the Badass Teachers offered support, and we started tweeting. We did an opt-out Twitter chat where we just constantly tweet our feelings and things to media or to Chicago Public Schools.
And that's the opt-out of the ISET.
Opt-out of ISET and testing as a whole. But currently it was the ISET, for the simple fact that it's not being used for anything this year. This is the last year of it. Most districts within the state got a waiver for the students not to take it. Chicago is persisting that their students take the ISET, where it's not being used for promotion status for students. It's not being used for the school's AYP. It's not being used.
Now tell everyone what AYP is.
For the school report card. But there's a certain level that they have to get to according to their, you know, they grade our schools on a level, regardless of what population is serviced, what students are in there. They grade them as level 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
And they get on probation, and it's for test scores and climate control of the school. So that test is not being used for that this year. It's not being used for teacher evaluations. You know, our teachers across the nation are being blamed for children's test scores.
Now, I'm not trying to, you know, ask a baited question. This is a real question. Well, all my questions are real, right? Womp womp. But so why is Chicago still doing the test if it has no, I mean, what's been the response?
Well, we have had over 80 schools to have students opt out of the ISET as of now, and we have had 2 schools that voted 100% by their members, their teachers, not to administer the ISET. There have been several stories of why our students must take it, and we have not found any foundies with it. It will say that they will lose funding. More Than a Score, which is a group of parents, and some educators, they found that you won't lose funding. They said that the students will be held back, but when you look on the Chicago Public Schools promotion website, it's not even in the criteria for grade promotion. It was last year. My 3rd grader had to take it in order to be promoted. It's not used for teachers' evaluations. They're just saying that you must take this test, but they're not giving us any valid reasons as to why they must take it this year and miss 2 weeks of instruction. 8 to 10 hours of instruction taking the test, as well as countless hours of instruction lost while they're prepping them for the test. Our students take over 15 standardized tests a year.
15?
Over 15.
Our preschoolers take 4.
What standardized test does a preschooler take?
Well, the first one they take is the EZR, which is the Early Screening Inventory, which is a diagnostic test that is used to identify possible problems. And the way it's supposed to work is when you get a kid that's red flagged, they get services. Basically doesn't happen.
Okay, and then the second
Then
one?
the second one is we have to give the reach, like everybody else, which is, you know, the counting, and can you pick out a letter from a number, that sort of thing.
Right.
Then we give the Teacher Strategies Gold, which is ongoing all year. There are 38 checkpoints per child. Each must be accompanied by an observation, all uploaded into a data system. 3 times a year we have to do that. Then those kids going to kindergarten have to take the kindergarten readiness test. Now, all these skills overlap on these tests. And between the reach and the early screening inventory, I sat in the hallway for a month screening kids while my teacher assistant was left alone with the rest of them. A whole month. And you're trying to do a small group activity and teach the kids shapes, whatever you're doing.
With preschoolers?
With preschoolers. We're talking 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. And the whole time you're doing it, you have to take notes on what they're doing. You can't just teach because you have to prove that you taught. Now, and they say you can't upload the data without an observation. Well, basically, if you've been working with your kids, you know where they're at. I could fill in those bubbles without the observation, but of course, you have to have the observation, and it takes hours and hours away from teaching, not to mention the time you spend at home uploading all this data to the system.
But if they're, so I understand that badass, you know, is you know, would it be fair, is it fair to say that the organization is anti-school reform?
Well, I would say the way that school reform is being carried out right now, absolutely, because the data, I think the primary reason, for instance, that CPS insists that children take these tests, and by the way, there have been many stories of what amounts to child abuse, you know, administrators and teachers being forced to put a great deal of pressure on children to take the test, even though their parents have already sent in opt-out letters and have been really clear with what they expect their child to be doing while testing is taking place. But the whole model of corporate education forum is to take this data and use it to label our schools and our children and our teachers as failures so they can close our schools, paving the way for the proliferation of charter schools, which can be very lucrative investment opportunities for hedge fund operators and bank managers and so forth. So there is no real reason to take the ISET except for compliance. They want teachers, parents, and students to just take the test, because without that data, the whole juggernaut of corporate school reform disintegrates.
So if Badass is not necessarily anti-school reform, then what reform measures would you like to see push forward?
More teacher involvement in these in reform. Mm-hmm. They're not consulting teachers, they're not consulting parents. You have these millionaires and people just with money that are coming into our communities that know nothing about our children, nothing about our community, nothing about what they're faced with before even learning. Mm-hmm. And they're coming in with just money and saying, I want that school, I want those children, I want to help them without any teaching certificates. They're not teachers, they're not educators, and they come up with all of this different testings and data and reform. They're reforming something that they should consult the teachers and the parents and the students, see what's going on in these schools. They're just coming up with these different standards, and they're not even educators. Right.
They're almost actively experimenting with our children as they go through school. And it's called venture philanthropy. So organizations like the Center for Reform of Public Education, the Broad Foundation, the Walton Foundation, the Gates Foundation are basically putting dollars over democracy. And because the public school system is so starved for cash, they can dangle billions of dollars in front of the school systems, and the school systems will bend over backwards to get that cash. And the whole philosophy of venture philanthropy is that it's not just charitable giving, it's we're giving, but we expect a return on our investment. And so what they're doing is using this to close schools and proliferate charters so they can use them to make money. I mean, the public education system has been described as a $1 trillion emerging market. But what we're finding is that education is a social service. It's not an industry. Mm-hmm. And when you apply a business model to education, then the profit motive comes first. Profit always comes before the needs of students, and we believe that that's wrong, and we demand it be changed.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with someone, and I was trying to explain, it's like, you're trying to use qualitative metrics in order to analyze a very qualitative field. And so it almost does feel like sometimes you're trying to force things to fit in order to validate the effort or the outcome. But let me ask you this. So when we talk about education reform, which is, it's a huge platform right now throughout Chicago, throughout the nation in general. So the purpose, I read in one of the articles, one of Mark's blogs, that's the founder, so I was reading his blog, is to get a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. Has that happened yet? Has anyone had a seat at the table yet?
I don't think anywhere.
Not really.
Not even, definitely not here in Chicago. We have 50 public schools closed without, you had a lot of parent voice, you had a lot of teacher voice, community voice. Did we have a seat at that table when they wanted to close 193 schools at first?
Then what would be the response to, well, the purpose of local school council, the LSC, is to give the seat at the table? What's the answer with that?
Well, I would say that is an important democratic institution. However, we have an appointed school board in Chicago, the only district in the state where the people cannot elect the members of the school board. Instead, they're handpicked by the mayor himself. And so I've literally witnessed board members fall asleep or text in board meetings while parents, students, and teachers are pouring their hearts out in pleading and begging to get the things that we need. Local school councils are fantastic, but it's important to note that charter schools do not have local school councils. There is no legal requirement for parent voice and teacher and community voice in charter schools. And so every time a public school closes, not only are the people of Chicago losing a public asset, but they're also losing their voice in their children's education, their legal voice in their children's education.
I've talked to charter school teachers who have told me that they are been told they cannot talk to parents. So of course they're out in the parking lot, across the street, talking to parents. And they've also told me they can't get any supplies because it's a for-profit education. So why should we give you supplies? We can make more money if we don't give you extra things. Some of them don't even have books in their schools either.
And I'm a charter school parent as well. And why I fight so hard for public education is because we like to use this term, we drunk the Kool-Aid. And you know, I drunk the Kool-Aid for the charter schools. My sophomore is in a charter school. I have no parent voice. The teachers, there's no local school council. There's like a group of moms who do things within the school, like fundraising. And I refuse to fundraise because the charter schools get so much money outside of what public schools get. And I don't have a voice. I don't have a voice. I don't have a voice. My child doesn't even have a voice in what electives he wants to take. I have a 10-year-old who is a very well public speaker. And then I have a 16-year-old who writes very well, but just not comfortable speaking in public. So they had him take public speaking. And the teacher stated that, well, your little brother is so well in public speaking and your mom is so well, we know that you'll be well. And he's like, I don't want to do public speaking. Can I take computer? Can I take technology? Can I take something else? And they just have this formatted schedule that all of them are taking with no voice from the students, you know, and that is not fair. If he was in a public school, he would have a voice. He'd be able to sit with his counselor and with his teachers and say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is what I'm comfortable with. Can you find something where I can blossom in? Not put me in a program where I'm just gonna fail. And what happened? He failed public speaking. Oh, no. I have a student that has a 4.1 GPA in a charter school in a full honors program, top 25% of his class, but he will not get honors credits for all his class, but for one, because the charter schools do not offer honors classes or AP classes where they would get those credits. But yet he's isolated from the entire school, 25 students, from first period through 8th, including lunch. They have to take these classes. They work very hard, 4.1 GPA for a sophomore, but won't get credit for honors classes.
They're not accredited, right?
They're not accredited. None of the charter schools are. And I found that out after the fact. So if it's parent choice, then if you're giving us equal choice, that's not equal. That's not equal to a public school. I could have took him to my neighborhood school instead of driving him 19 miles away every day and picking him up in one of the most dangerous communities in Chicago, and he would have gotten the AP classes. He would have gotten a counselor for a small number of students that would have realized that this is not for him. Let me put him in something where he can grow and blossom, not force him into something. So the charter schools, they take away parent voice, they take away student voice and their involvement. I can't talk to the teachers. I can't just email them, and then even when I did, it's like, this is what they have to do. You have no voice.
So what is the meeting point between entities such as Badass Teachers and Chicago Public Schools? What's if someone said, okay, well, let's come to the table and let's hash it out, what's the happy medium? Is there one?
Would be they work with the unions, I say.
Yeah, so I mean,
but what does that mean? Because, you know, sometimes we have these conversations and real concrete deliverables. So what does that look like? What does it look like to say to work with the unions, to work with the parents? What does that look like? Because they'll say, well, we do that now. So what does that look like?
Well, first of all, it would be an elected school board that represented all the communities. I mean, when they closed the schools, it was in the African American and Hispanic communities. It was a total racist closing of schools.
Yes.
They didn't even consider things like gang boundaries. So what you really need at the table is you need your high school teacher, you need your early childhood teacher, you need your grade school teacher, your middle school teacher, your parent. You need your nurse, your social worker, your psychiatrist. You need everybody who is involved in these schools. These kids are coming with so much baggage. You know, we send our kids to school with a backpack with what? Paper and crayons. Our kids are coming to school with refrigerators full of issues on their backs. Somebody just got shot, just been to another funeral. I can't tell you how many kids I've seen wearing T-shirts representing somebody.
Rest in peace,
we don't. The nurse told
yeah.
us that don't send me any sick kids. I'm here one day a week. I can do paperwork.
Yeah.
We don't have a nurse.
Right.
We don't have a social week. There's nobody to send the kids to if they just had this horrible sit down and read. Well, how can he read when he saw somebody get shot on the way to school?
Well, this is true. Tim?
I see the Badass Teachers Association, the value that I find in it is that it's not a replacement for our local unions, but rather it complements union activism. And it ties together the locals from all over the country. And what teachers find when they get involved with BATS is that we all have the same issues and concerns, and that in fact public education is under attack. You know, the Chicago Teachers Union, I think, puts forth an excellent model for collaborating with parents and community members. What's different about the Chicago Teachers Union is its social movement unionism. You know, union labor has declined since the 1970s and 60s, you know, exponentially. And so, you know, we realized that in order to protect teachers and in fact protect the profession of public education, that we need to reach out and we need to make sure that there's equity and justice in our society as a whole. And in fact, the reason that kids, the number one reason that kids underperform on the standardized tests that they throw at our students all the time is poverty. Everybody knows it. All the research indicates it.
And there's no wraparound services.
And absolutely, like Katie was saying, I mean, I had to fight very hard at my school to get a psychologist. I've had to threaten organizing parent lawsuits in order to get special ed teacher positions filled. And that's ridiculous. You know, I shouldn't have to risk my job to get what my students need when it should be already provided, and by law it has to be there. So I think like what's happening in Chicago with the Chicago Teachers Union collaborating with groups like Raise Your Hand and More Than a Score, and we see that, you know, good teaching conditions are good learning conditions. So there's a natural alliance between parents and teachers, and I think that you're seeing, we don't know. I mean, your original question was, what does that look like, parent-union collaboration? Well, I would say it's developing right here, right now.
But you know what it always, you know, sometimes you tell the students, you know, or I tell my kids, you know, it's like if you don't know what it looked like, but you definitely know what it shouldn't look like.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's kind of where we're at in this stage of the conversation. So what's next for Badass? What's next?
What's next?
Maintain vigilance or move into another direction? What's next?
Well, I think that the most important issues that we face is reducing standardized testing, increasing the amount of time and the freedom that our teachers and our students get when it comes to the curriculum.
Well, wait, you know, I have it real quick. I'm sorry not to cut you off.
No, that's all right.
I have a question, so, about standardized testing. So, like, parents were able to opt out of ISET, which my children did, and it was like it was the best week they had ever had in school, to be honest with you. That's what they were like,
My son
completely
opted out
ecstatic
too.
about
Mine
it.
too.
Can parents opt out? Can parents have their children opt out of the other standardized tests? How does that work?
Parents have opted their children out of all standardized tests, not just the ISET, because it has no ties to anything. They have opted out of the MAP test. They have opted out of NWEA testing.
So then, how does the student advance? Then are those scores needed in order to advance, for the student to advance to the next grade?
Well, for some tests, they are attached, like the NWEA and the MAP is attached, that is for promotion for the next grade, and then it gives the school a grade level. So in some communities, like in the community I live in, Washington Heights and in the Roseland community, our schools are kind of reluctant of opting out of those tests that are attached to school and teacher evaluations, because those are schools that close.
Right.
When we fought for Marcus Garvey to stay open, the one thing that everyone kept repeating was, our students read at 77.2 ISET standards in reading and math. And that was the reason why we were on probation, because we dropped down a few points. We dropped down a few points because all of our high testers or high performing students were going to magnet schools outside of the area. So it looks like our neighborhood and our community schools aren't performing. So within my community, because we know in the African American and Latino community where they closed 50 schools due to low test scores and they like to say underutilized. Like there were no
Which was
students.
a flawed formula.
Right, which there were no students there. As in my son, in his 3rd grade class, they had 19 students. That's a parent's dream, a student's dream, and I'm sure a teacher's dream that you can focus on 19 students versus where I worked, 38 in 3rd grade. And that's a testing grade, a benchmark grade. So the parents who opted their children out of all testing because they don't agree with it, the teachers don't get them back. So it's not like our students are taking tests, hours and hours of taking these tests and preps, and the teacher gets it back and say, this is what Ashawn needs, let me help him with that.
Right.
Those tests are put in a database and they're going to La La Land, and then you just get a grade and that's it.
Yeah, I was reading Mark's blog and he talked about the 3 principles that guides testing in public school. It says test transparency, no test given which guides instruction, no data sharing, no selling of the info at all, no sharing with any educational agencies without parent permission, and then was this no test-based teacher accountability. So the performance on the test is not tied to the evaluation of the instructor. Right. So thank you guys for joining us. We're going to close out our conversation, get ready for our online discussion where I'd like to talk about then how do we walk the fine line of accountability without the testings, okay? That's our show for today. The conversation continues online at wycc.org. See you next time on The Professors.